What is good, everyone? I am Keith Jackson, the Director of Membership Education for the FAA Managers Association. It is December 16th, 2025. We're about to wrap up the year, and we are going to give everyone an end of year look and a look into the future, hopefully a better look than what we had. To do that is Mr. Ron Eritano of the Normandy Group and FAMA's Executive Director. Ron, how you been?
Doing well, Keith. It's great to see you, and I'm glad we're meeting here today out of a government shutdown.
Yep, the longest one we had, and we're not going to spend time rehashing history. Unfortunately, it's not fun history. It was the longest shutdown in our history. You could just go back at the news, and everything is there. We want to take a look more into the future, and we have a deadline of now January 30 to where we're looking at this, and I already know people are looking at this going, "Here we go again."
Yeah, Keith. I mean, since the last shutdown ended, that 43-day shutdown on November 12th, there's been a lot of focus on how do we uh, get things done in advance of January 30th, so we're not back in the same place we just found ourselves. Now, in terms of updates, just as a quick refresher, every year to fund the federal government, there needs to be 12 appropriations bills passed. Included in the deal to end the shutdown was the passage of three of those appropriations bills, none of which fund the FAA. That bill, the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Bill, is still outstanding and is operating under CR right now, such as the FAA is operating. That being said, there's been a lot of discussion since November 12th on how do we get this done so we're not back in that awful position we found ourselves in October and early November. And the good news is appropriators have been having a lot of discussions. Now, nothing's been voted on quite yet on the House and Senate floor, but the Senate appropriators and the House appropriators continue to have those discussions. And one of the good things I keep hearing is when they talk about those nine remaining bills, it's not clear they'll get all nine done, but it sounds like there are ones they consider low hanging fruit, ones that are less controversial, where they think they can reach a deal on before January 30th. And one of those bills that's almost always included in that conversation is that transportation appropriations bill, which would fund the FAA. So I remain, cautiously optimistic that they can get a deal done, at least on that particular funding bill that would keep the FAA operational, by January 30th.
Yep, and that was one thing I know we heard from members of Congress that were on the Republican side, how they wanted this appropriations process, 12 bills, no CRs, no omnibus, that kind of stuff. And that's where I know a few people are having some heartburn going, well, you've heard this. And I think it's just, like you said, let's just wait and see. Because if the non controversial stuff is there, you would think that this will be an easy pass, right?
Correct. You never doubt the ability of Congress to screw up an easy situation. But I do feel like when we get back in January, I mean, it would be ideal if they would have gotten a lot of this done in December. But like always, Congress waits to the last minute to get things done. So the hope is once we get back in January, by mid-January, we'll have a much better idea of what's moving, what's not moving, where pressure needs to be applied, and I have no doubt this probably will run up towards the end of January to get everything done as much as possible. I am also, though, the more I think about it and the more conversations I've had with members of Congress of both parties on both the House and Senate, there doesn't seem to be much of an appetite for another shutdown from either party. I think the Republicans don't feel very comfortable with where they landed after the shutdown from a political standpoint. And the Democratic officers I've met with, while they were seeking a lot of changes, as it relates to healthcare and some other non-germane issues, they feel like they've gotten to a point where they tried, it was not successful, and shutting down the government now doesn't benefit anybody. So I think I'm hopeful that for whatever appropriations bills they cannot get done, they'll probably just pass a year-long CR through the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. So maybe again it's the rose-colored glasses as we head into the holidays here. But my hope is that, and what I'm hearing from folks is that we shouldn't have a repeat of what just happened, in October and early November.
Yeah, and the final thing I'd say on the government shutdown is a kudos and a really thank you to the members that helped us when we needed it the most. The 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 amount of emails and calls that went to these offices, it was there. This just was the shutdown. If you go back to 2018-19, that is how deep this went for both sides. So our members turned out. We had members, or I should say offices, contacting our ledge team saying, we hear you. That was one thing I know that was asked, what are we doing?
Absolutely, Keith. And it was, I mean, it was thousands. Honestly, it was the most outreach we've ever had as part of our legislative tool in 15 years that I've worked with the FAA Managers Association. And it was impressive. And I can tell you this, that outreach made a difference. I mean, I can't tell you how many congressional offices, whether it's the members of Congress themselves or their staffs, who indicated to me that they heard us loud and clear. And, it was certainly in the back of their minds, or the front of their minds for that matter, as they were trying to figure a way out of that messy situation.
Yep. And if you want to talk about positives coming out of negatives, there was one positive that we are hearing that actually looks like it has a lot of momentum. And it's not the Aviation Funding Stability Act. It is something different, though, but basically it's the same thing in reality.
Yes, Keith, and I'm glad you brought this up. So, as a quick refresher for others, following the previous, very long 35-day shutdown in 2018, 2019, a bill was introduced called the Aviation Funding Stability Act that, in advance of future shutdowns, would keep the FAA employees, particularly in the air traffic space, paid during any future shutdowns. At the time, coming hot off a long shutdown, it got a lot of support initially, and then as time petered out and that shutdown got further in the rearview mirror, it lost some momentum and never was able to get over the finish line. Some of the concerns were very technical as it relates to congressional appropriations accounts, etc. And there were some concerns among some leadership of is that the right vehicle? So as we ended this latest, even longer 43-day shutdown, a new approach was taken and a new bill was introduced. HR 6086, as you mentioned, Keith, the Aviation Funding Solvency Act, was introduced by House Transportation Infrastructure Chairman Sam Graves and his counterpart, the ranking member, highest ranking Democrat on the committee, Rick Larson from Washington, two members of which FAMA has very strong relationships with. All this really does, it would keep FAA employees paid in the event of a future shutdown, but it draws from a different funding mechanism. This being the Aviation Insurance Revolving Fund, and there's a few technical issues around it, but for the most part, it would operate in a similar manner to the Aviation Funding Stability Act. The fact that both the chairman and ranking member are the supporters and the primary sponsors of this makes us think that it definitely has a chance to move forward, certainly out of committee. When it gets to the House floor and over to the Senate, we'll have to see what happens. But we've already had a lot of conversations via our legislative team, ourselves here at the Normandy Group, and others in our leadership, really encouraging members of Congress to embrace this approach and don't put us in the middle of every shutdown. We often are used as that leverage or negotiating tool because of the pressure it places on not just the economy but everyday folks, and it's just unfair, and we've made that case time and again, and we're hopeful that this new legislation is something that can really get enough momentum to get over the finish line here in the next couple of months.
Yep, absolutely. And I looked over a story that Delta Airlines alone said the shutdown cost them over $200 million. So it's, the impacts that go beyond the government into the private sector are there, whether contracts are funded or not. There's been a push to how do we modernize the air traffic control system, which I know today we have the administrator on the Hill who has to talk about what is going on and what is going to go on now that also a contract has been signed and awarded. I don't know if you want to touch on that real quickly.
Yeah. So that it's kind of part of that process, as you all are aware. Pretty much since the new administration came on board, there's been a lot of focus on how do we, urgently improve and enhance all of the technical capabilities across the air traffic control system, along with just addressing all the workforce pipeline needs that we talk about in many of these calls and many of these YouTube videos. But the effort of this ATC reform bill, just again another quick refresher. Back in earlier this year, both the House Transportation Committee and the Senate Commerce Committee started soliciting ideas from stakeholders, key stakeholders like ourselves, like FAMA, to ask what would you want to see in some type of larger ATC reform bill. Effort that could be forthcoming in the coming months. And we submitted a list of recommendations. If you'd like to see them, I encourage you to go to our website. These materials are listed on there. And so that process got delayed a little bit by the shutdown, as you might imagine. But now that we're out of the shutdown, there's the hearings this week. Administrator Bedford's going to be before the House Transportation Committee today. Tomorrow he's going to be before the Senate Commerce Committee. And the thought is, now that they've awarded this contract to Parsons is to be the lead integrator as part of this process, it should kick off the legislative aspect of this, because there's resources that are going to need to be available. They're talking needs up to another $20 billion, but also just what does this look like from an implementation standpoint? What is needed beyond just the technical capabilities that will come with Parsons being named the integrator? So this is, I think, a first step in what should be an active 3 months on this issue. And we're thankful to the committee staff for always asking for FAMA's input on this. And I think that's a testament to our membership constantly reaching out, our leadership constantly reaching out, and of course our ledge team constantly reaching out. So there's more to come on this, but we're grateful to see that this process is finally underway.
Yep, and the directors are going to be in Dallas in January, and I know this is going to be a lot of our discussions in January about where we are and how to go forward, how to support these initiatives, and then come April, of course, it's where we start getting back into I would say maybe the legislative cycle will start to kick off again, and then we get into midterms. But the other thing that was going on, we've been pushing for a while, which had some legs, was, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, was in the NDA, at least in the House version, but it was the DOD Pilot Program we talk about, to where we have individuals in the DOD come over to DOT as frontline managers at low-level facilities. Do you want to touch on that real quickly?
Yeah, absolutely, Keith. Yeah, so if some of you may recall, it's an issue we've been putting to address the manager and supervisor pipeline issues. There's been a lot of focus, I think nationally, certainly in this administration, the previous administration, on how do we get more controllers in our ranks, and we all agree that it's necessary. There's too many people are going out the door in retirements, et cetera, and not enough are coming in. And there has been, I think, a lot of progress on that front, on the frontline controllers, the newbies into the system. But one of the things that we as representatives of both managers and supervisors and more experienced folks in the air traffic space is how do we not wait 10 years for that controller to become a experienced super or manager. And one of the things we've been working with both the FAA and the Hill with over the last couple of years is trying to set up a program with the DoD folks, particularly in the civilian DoD world. It's estimated there's roughly about 1,900 civilian air traffic controllers within DoD, again, civilian, non-uniform. And from time to time, we've had multiple instances where some of those folks with similar experience to our managers and supervisors from types of facilities they worked at, type of traffic they handled, that have indicated a desire to come on over to the FAA ranks. And unfortunately, due to the way the system's set up, it's not that simple. They often have to go to the back of the line and work their way up through the academy, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is definitely not the most efficient way to go about addressing a lot of the needs, particularly in the manager and supervisor ranks. So we've been pushing this effort along with the FAA and DoD. And I mentioned the Hill. We've floated it on the Hill the last 2 years, and we finally got some traction. You mentioned NDAA this year, the National Defense Authorization Act. We had a member from New York, Representative Laura Gillen from out on Long Island, who introduced language that would really force DoD to come closer to the table and have that conversation more directly with the FAA on what that would look like. Unfortunately, like everything in DC, sometimes amendments get stripped out during legislative processes, and that did. But the good news is Representative Gillen is working with us to identify a number of other co-sponsors. We've already lined up 2 or 3 of them just to introduce a standalone bill to do exactly what she would like to do. And similarly, we've also had outreach from Senator Tim Sheehy's office from Montana on the Senate side, and he wants to do something similar, introduce legislation to set up a pilot program. So there's a lot of momentum right now for that particular issue. I think everyone sees it as good policy, good government. So we think we've got some traction there. We're going to be working very closely with both our House champions and our Senate champions to get to where we need to be here in the coming year. And hopefully, we would include this as part of that ATC reform bill effort I mentioned earlier.
Yep. It's safe to say that as this year is going to wind down, we're going to have a lot of work going into next year, because the ATC system has been in plain sight more than I can ever remember since the tragic accident that happened at DCA. And this is an issue where our position, at least on the funding side, was what we have right now is a good start. If we really want to reform this, we have a long way to go when it comes to ensuring that funding. And that, I think, is the big thing, is not just having laws passed, but having the appropriators actually appropriate the funds to go with this project. And it looks like there is a lot of momentum on with that. When you look at Senator Cruz's comments with the ranking member in the Senate, there's a uniform response, in my view, that this is going to happen. It's now just a matter of time, not if anymore.
Absolutely, Keith. The only caveat I'd place on that is you referenced it earlier. Next year is an election year, typically in midterm election year for that matter, and typically in those election years, it could be, the legislative calendar shrinks, right? I mean, they pretty much try to get everything done by September so they can get home and campaign and do what they need to do to try to get reelected. So we have a truncated legislative calendar year and some major initiatives, on the docket, and so we're going to need to really keep the pressure up on these folks, and that's why it's so important for our legislative team, reaching out to all of our rank and file members to participate in this process, because the more they hear from us, the more momentum that we keep that momentum moving forward.
Absolutely. Ron, we're at 15 odd minutes, and I know you have a lot going on right now, and I really do thank you for taking the time on Tuesday right now in the middle of the morning, going out and talking to us. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I would just close with this, Keith. I mean, again, thank you for this opportunity to join you here today. But I know it's been a trying year. As trying a year, I've been working in this space for, almost 2 decades now. And it's as trying a year as I've seen for our members and our community as there's been, started off in January with the tragedy at DCA, moving forward with major restructuring in the federal government, and some of the DOJ related efforts. And now, obviously dealing with a record historic 43-day shutdown. So I appreciate all of you for all the great work you do and your ability to stay committed to the mission, regardless of all the heavy headwinds that you all face this year. So I'm grateful and then really appreciative of having this opportunity to represent FAMA here in Washington and in the team. So thank you, and I hope all of you have a happy holidays, and hopefully we'll have some good news to share come mid-January when Congress gets back here and we can at least take another shutdown off the table.
Absolutely. Again, Ron, thank you for you and your team. For those of you, again, you don't see it publicly, but Ron and his team, they are constantly working behind the scenes, constantly talking to staff and members. You have no idea how much him and his team do. Really, thank you, Ron. Thank you, Normandy, for helping us out here through everything that we face. It really is greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Keith.
Hey, so for those of you that don't know, and I think you should know, we had it down there. You can get urgent text alerts. Here's the QR code for you. There's all things social that you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, that you can do to help us keep up with everything going on. Thank you again. Happy holidays from everyone. We hope that you all get some time with your loved ones. Again, Ron, it's been a trying year. Hopefully next year we come out not as stressed out, I think, as is what happened this year. Thanks again, bud.
Take care.
Have a good one, everyone. Until we hit the record button again, I'm Keith Jackson. He's Ron Eritano from Normandy. Happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.